How did Louis Vuitton go from making these watches to these pieces of horological art? Back in 1988, Louis Vuitton released their first watch, which was the Monterey 1. Now, it was a quartz movement and really wasn't that well received. It was a bit of a flop. But fast forward to today, and Louis Vuitton have re-released the Monterey as a limited edition gold piece that sells for $77,500. So how did Louis Vuitton go from making watches that nobody really cared about to selling limited editions of that same watch for astronomical prices? After releasing the Monterey, Louis Vuitton really didn't dabble in watches until the early 2000s. After the quartz crisis had sort of slowed down and the appreciation for sports watches and steel watches had started to come back into favor. In 2002, Louis Vuitton re-entered the watch market with the Tambour, and that sort of continues to be the backbone of their watch catalog today, although it's changed a lot. Now, in the early 2000s, Louis Vuitton had already accumulated a lot of watch brands like Tag, Zenith, Bulgari, and Hublot. But these brands only made up a small portion of their sales. Now, the watches that LV were releasing in these early days were quite true to their brand. They were loud, they had logos all over them, they were massive, and they were really designed for a certain clientele. It was for people that wanted to flex a brand name rather than to show that they knew about watches. And the watches weren't necessarily bad, but they definitely appealed to a certain demographic. Many of them were quartz or used purchase movements from brands like Etta, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but the prices that Louis Vuitton were able to charge for them, or were charging for them, were astronomical. On price, they were competing against brands like Rolex, but the watch was a far inferior product. Now, Louis Vuitton has such a strong brand name that they were able to do that, but they had ambitions of creating something better. They wanted to get to the point where they were competing against brands like Patek. So LV decided that they needed to make their own high watchmaking department. But LV wasn't going to manufacture these watches themselves. They were looking to outsource to a company called La Fabrique du Temps. And La Fabrique du Temps was going to help Louis Vuitton design and manufacture more high-end watches that had custom movements and more fine casework. Now, this is not an overnight process. It can take years or even longer for brands to develop, design, and create watches at scale. But now Louis Vuitton had the capability to create great watches. To really showcase how serious they were about creating great watches, in 2011, Louis Vuitton purchased La Fabrique du Temps. And in early 2012, they decided to purchase renowned dial maker Le Mans Cadran. And in 2014, LV decided to put all of these pieces together and built a massive manufacturing facility just outside of Geneva, dedicated to their high watchmaking aspirations. Now, Michel Navas, one of the founders of La Fabrique du Temps, was originally working with brands like AP, Patek, and Frank Muller to create their high-end and grand complications. And LV wanted to bring that experience and knowledge and craftsmanship to their own watches. And this was the motivating factor behind buying La Fabrique du Temps. It was allowing them to have in-house watchmaking without having to create it. And LV really started to stretch their legs. They started making some really great movements and complications. Their dial work and their casework was evident that there were some real craftsmen working on them. Now, these weren't just watches covered in big LV logos and monogrammed and massive cases. The first watch that really stood out to me, that showcased that LV was doing something different and they were really paying attention to what they were creating, was the spin time. It's got this really unique skeletonized background with a unique way to display time. A real change came in 2021 when CEO of LVMH, Bernard Arnault, decided to place his youngest son, Jean Arnault, into the LV high-end watchmaking department. Now, Jean is a watch enthusiast. I'm sure he grew up exposed to a lot of great watches, and he quickly climbed the ranks and began running the watch department. And Jean was really well received by the watch industry. It can be a very challenging industry to break into. People are very critical and judgmental, but he very intelligently built up the LV brand, not just by creating great watches, but by building up and supporting the watchmaking community as a whole. He put the LV money to good use, supporting and investing in up-and-coming watchmakers and craftsmen, as well as creating prizes for independent brands and watchmakers to really showcase what this next generation of watchmakers was doing. And maybe it even helps Louis Vuitton get first pick at some of these great craftsmen that they are supporting. If you're still watching, thank you so much. If you wouldn't mind giving this video a like and maybe even subscribing to my channel, it would mean a lot to me. In my eyes, what really shifted Louis Vuitton into that category of great watchmaking was their collaboration with Acrivia and Rexepi. This is the LV RR01 Chronographe à Sonnerie, a unique dual-sided watch with one of the faces following the Acrivia design language and the other follows LV's design language. At the time, Acrivia's founder Rexep was one of the most successful young talents in the watchmaking world. And this collab showed LV's commitment to creating exceptional timepieces and their support of independent watchmaking. And it made a real buzz in the watch community. Now, notably, this was also the first time, I believe, that Louis Vuitton has used their brand and logo inside another brand's logo. LV is very particular about how and where they use their brand, and this was a sign that they were willing to work with independent brands. And this watch obviously got a lot of attention at the time, but has kind of fallen off, and I still think that this was a really, really great watch. I understand that it is maybe not as wearable or as functional as some other watches, but as an art piece, this is truly, truly exceptional. And I think that's what Louis Vuitton wanted it to be. They weren't expecting this to be a daily wear. Obviously, it's a limited edition, but this was a stake in the ground that Louis Vuitton was saying, hey, we're here and we're ready to make some incredible watches. And Louis Vuitton has not slowed down in recent years. They're continuing to push the boundaries and create exceptional pieces that are uniquely LV and true to their brand without being overtly loud and feel, too branded. For example, the Automata series sees LV and Fabrique du Temps really push the limits of their capability, making bespoke art pieces like this Tambour Bushido or the Tycho Galactique, as well as the 2021 GPHG winning Carpe Diem. And this is where I see LV developing watches, using their money and clientele to make watches that make you stop and really think about them. And this is where I like to see LV developing watches where they're using their vast amount of money and their capabilities to create watches that are exceptional, and they can cost a lot of money because they have the clientele that are willing to pay for them. To me, these watches make you stop and think, and they really stand out in a crowd where in today's world, there are so many watches and it's almost numbing because we see so many of them. So to make people stop and think about the watches and really look at them is impressive. Now in today's world where there are so many options for watches and a lot of watches end up looking similar, Louis Vuitton has been able to really stand out and create watches that are different and make you stop and think. We live in a world of homogenized taste and minimalism, and I think LV is doing a great job in standing in their own lane, creating watches that are different, not like what anybody else is doing, and really being true to the LV brand. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching.